Hi, I'm Paul Allen.
And I'm Edgar.
And welcome back to the brush.
And this is episode 11, so we're getting close to a full year of our podcast. And in today's episode, we have some interesting stuff, but we also have an Instagram page so that if you are just listening to this and you want to have a look at the pictures later on, we put some of the best stuff over there, and the link for that will be in the description.
Or in this particular episode, some of the worst painting jobs will also be on there.
Some bad painting may also be there, but it's the stuff that's relevant to what we're talking about today. So what are we talking about today?
So we've got some painting failures, which I just wanted to talk about, and really, it's important to take into consideration we all make mistakes and go back over them, and just because we only ever show this is the finished product on here doesn't mean that we don't struggle like everyone else.
And just remember, there's no such thing as a ruined model. There kind of is, but in terms of painting, you can't ruin a model because you can always paint strip. So get stuck in, paint bravely, as the other podcast would say.
That's it.
If you ruin it, well, if you do a bad paint job, just kind of strip it and try again. Mm-hmm. We'll also be talking about some model durability and how easy it is to physically damage the models, where you really can ruin a model that way. And we'll be mentioning some glazes, but there's a bit of an announcement about that. Mm-hmm. And then the final topic we'll be talking about is game changer and what that means. But first, Paul, would you like to show the audience some of the things that you have painted this month?
So this month, obviously, as you saw at the end last month, I've got all these new Sisters of Battle models. But in amongst that, I have been painting some Death Guard. So we have... so a lot of these came with
Chaos Beaky Boys.
With the box set that I purchased when I first decided to get back into model making. And it came with 3... Plague Marines and 3 Intercessors. So I've got those, and then I've got some...
one of the starting...
Yeah, 3 of each.
Okay, got it.
A couple of Poxwalkers. And then I've also got some from Blackstone. Something Lord, what is he? A Death Lord?
Chaos Lord?
Chaos Lord, yeah.
Or, okay. There is a specific type of Chaos Lord, which it is... we'll look it up.
So basically, I've painted up enough minis to do a 500 point game as Chaos, but I obviously mixed in a few Blackstone, so just to make the numbers up.
Yeah, just to make it a bit more interesting as well.
I mean, these are really out of my comfort zone. I actually really enjoyed painting these.
Is that in terms of the amount of detail or the size of the details?
It's just completely different, It's all like tentacles and bits of slime and
the style of details, right? Got you.
Yeah.
You've painted Space Marines and Battle Sisters before, so I guess that's more orderly and easily to define. Yeah. So this is a lot more messy and okay.
Chucking Nurgle's rotten things.
It's always a good thing to try something new, even if you don't like it. There's a chance that you do.
So I got some of these Chaos Spawn.
This scary looking spiky thing.
Yeah, they're quite cool. So we did those, and then sort of there's not really a lot to show on the Sisters front, but we've got Tiaria, Polos, and some cat hair.
There's another Battle Sister done.
She's nearly done. I've got got my High Lord of Terror here as well, John.
You're working on the big one.
Yeah. She's the showpiece.
Can't wait to see that in person, because that's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's not as big as I thought it was going to be, I must admit. She's if you look at her compared to the models of the same, they're roughly the same height. I was expecting.
What's that other one?
So that is so that's a standard Paragon warsuit.
Right.
And then obviously the High Lord of Terror lady, whose name I haven't learnt, she's in roughly the same armour, but obviously more graded and stuff. But I was expecting her to be a little bit bigger.
Just a bigger version of the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But is it actually the same size then?
Yes, pretty much. Pretty much. There might be a couple of mil.
I guess it's something like having Terminator armored Space Marines and then having a character in Terminator armor. They're going to be the same size.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, good point. So yeah, I mean, that's really the extent of what I've painted and finished, other than another one of these Chaos Lords. Chaos, I'm going to show you in a minute, that turned out awful.
Yeah, we can save that for our little discussion on the difficulty of painting. The models that I had no difficulty at all painting were the Gaunt's Ghosts that I've painted this month, and particularly the new Gaunt's Ghost character squad, which I spent some extra time and effort painting those, but I do have some more generic models as well. Brostin with his heavy flamer maybe, and I even tried some interesting stuff with Gaunt specifically, including magnetizing his hand so that I can change weapons. But with this, I actually used some inks not for highlighting, which a lot of people have seen before, but actually thinning down my paints with the inks instead of thinning down the paints with water. And that's a technique that I've seen variations of, but kind of I tried it in a slightly different technique, and it came out, I think, really well. Because everywhere here has both ink and paint of the same, or roughly the same colour, and the ink just makes everything just that little bit more vibrant. And so that character looked great on the battlefield. Another model that I've used some inks on is an old Empire flail dude. The flail I cut that off years ago, so I had to repair it with a little flag. And I used some inks on the blue, but then for the flag, I went and did a bit of freehand.
Yes, yeah.
I haven't done much in the way of freehand work. I've done on orc vehicles, I've done checks and dags, and on my Tanith I've done tattoos and stuff like that. But I've never done an actual image, like a picture in the freehand. And so that was an interesting first try. And it's nowhere near as scary as people think it is.
It's pretty
like
scary.
This is just a nice cartoony little character that I've painted, but with a little bit of effort, it wouldn't take many iterations for you to actually get quite good at that, I feel. So at some point, I'm going to try and find some models where I can actually do some proper freehand on flags, banners.
Flags, yeah.
Pauldrons, maybe. I know people who paint knights, the Imperial Knights with big pauldron stuff.
Some beautiful Imperial Knight art on Facebook I've seen.
Yeah, some fancy stuff there. But really, freehanding is sort of just an extension of painting the sculpted part of a model in a way. I'll need to ruminate on that, and I'll come up with some stuff to actually say. But short version, it's not as hard as people think. I've also painted a little dwarf with a Snap Hans pistol and a golden banner that he's just lifting over his head as if it's nothing. This model, I did a video on wet palette, like making your own wet palette, and how like there's no point paying 20-30 quid for a pre-made one when it's a tub, a sponge, and a bit of paper. So I just picked a random model off of the pile of shame, the pile of opportunity, as it should be known. And I painted that up for that video, and so I have a painted dwarf. And as you will notice, I haven't done the base.
No.
So back to my usual tricks of not painting the bases of models. And finally, another one of the things that pops up every now and again, for me, I have a model from the Zona Secrets of Chernobyl board game. Specifically, this is the Hunter. So he's got
a shotty,
a monster's head on his belt, and a double-barreled shotgun. and this was actually a really kind of an interesting video to make, particularly at the very end when I played. When I'm doing the zone of videos, I play the game and then I paint the model with the character I played the game as, and the end of the game for this one was weird and hilarious.
There are some odd endings on that game, I must admit.
So, some of them are the bad end, some of them are the good end we think, ? And some of them are just off the wall bonkers. Alright, so shall we mention glazes then? So we have a special announcement as well.
So coming hopefully in 2 weeks of this video going live, we're going to be introducing a mini-series where we're just going to explore...
A mini-series,
of course, where we're going to explore just some of the weird topics that have come up, and we just wanted to do a short play around, but film it.
Sometimes they're not going to be quite so short. Sometimes they're going to be quite in depth. It depends on what the subject is.
Yeah, more of it would be a digression if we did it in this podcast, more than anything. Yeah. So on this particular month, we got together and we have tested glazes.
So in a previous episode, I think it was actually last episode, Paul mentioned that he grabbed some of the Games Workshop pre-mixed glaze in red. And I said, it's so easy. You can just use water to make your own glaze. And we tested that out. And we tested out making a glaze with a matte medium. We didn't have a specific glaze medium, which I would like to try and compare. But then we compared the two that we were able to make with the official product. Not to spoil the video too much, but there were some interesting things to pick out of that.
Yes.
I'm going to overall I'm going to stick with my opinion that it's a technique, not a product, and so learning how to make a glaze makes you a better painter, rather than just buying a product. But I was actually impressed with how it performed, and so if you just wanted the effect with minimal effort and you weren't going to carry on painting afterwards, maybe there is some validity to that.
So yeah, I'm hoping to do some of these sisters with the shields using the glaze. So hopefully this time next month I'll actually have something to show.
Yeah, that would be interesting. If you do catch that in 2 weeks' time, and then the next episode of the podcast in a month's time, we'll see what Paul has managed to achieve with... are you going to use the official glaze?
Yeah, since I've got it.
As you have it, yeah, makes sense. So now that we've spoken about using a specific interesting technique and how a much more in-depth video is coming for the podcast today, shall we instead talk about the difficulties in painting sometimes, and how you can ruin a paint job?
Yeah, so as I say, I was painting these models up here that you can't see for a 500-point game, and I wouldn't say rushing it, but I was kind of working to a deadline. So obviously with the old Chaos Spawn, I mean, this one I love, I decided to go with pink and blue. Unfortunately, this guy is just awful. So
with the pink one, would you say that you actually like the paint job on the pink one that you did?
Yeah. It was red with a pink dry brush, a heavy pink dry brush, and then there's a red wash on the top of that.
Right.
And then the plan with the blue one was going to be a dark blue base, a light blue dry brush, and then a blue wash, because I've got a blue wash.
So the same technique, but with a different colour.
Yeah, basically. I think I made the poor choice of going with the three heads. Well, at least making them human skin colour. It kind of makes them look out of place. So yeah, I'm not happy with this, but the point is, I had a play, because both of these I was completely just a blank. I'm used to having models where I can just sit down, look at what the guide art is, and go, okay, right, well, what am I going to change to make it make it mine. Whereas these were completely blank canvas. It threw me for a bit, I must admit. But yeah, I'm happy with how that one came out. So you can see I put like Nurgle's Rot on the back there, just to add a little bit of slime and make him a little bit more disgusting and stuff. So yeah, that would probably be the plan for the blue one as well. But yeah, he's going to get paint stripped, I think, most likely.
Are you going to start from scratch with that?
Would you
at least try to paint the 3 heads in the blue to match the rest of it?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Would that fix the paint job here?
I think it will. If I do the blue, and then I was probably gonna. I don't know if it's too bright, but I was thinking about like dry brushing like that.
Yeah, very light blue.
To try and just bring it down a bit. But yeah. So I was a bit on that particular model. The other sort of disappointing paint job I have is this Brahman I printed for the Fallout game, and it just went really
lot of stuff.
It went really glossy. I think it's just because there was too much wash. I was trying to make him look all dirty and
yeah.
In fact,
the washes are.
That's the same technique as what I did on that with the pink, with the red and then a pink dry brush. But I mean, it's kind of sticky as well, and it's been done for months. Good.
It's interesting that you say that, because I've just been playing around with a model that I painted a few months back. Actually, one of the very first models I painted on video, a WizKids dwarf, which is a PVC model.
Oh yes, yeah, the rubbery kind ones.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I gave it a varnish, but months later I've picked it up and it's a kind of tacky to the touch.
Yeah, that's how I'd describe that.
And I checked some other models. I've checked another WizKids model and some other models that I painted around the same time. None of the others have it. It's just that one.
Some sort of reaction to the varnish.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. There's the same paints I'm using on all of them, and it's sticky on every part of the model, not just on a particular color or where there was I don't think I used any washes on that model, but it's just odd that that's happened. And I'm questioning myself as to maybe should I put another layer of varnish over the top? Would that cause more problems? Should I paint strip the whole thing and start from scratch? I really like it. It's a pretty simple paint job compared to what I can achieve now, but also I don't like painting the WizKids models. We've mentioned this before, that the different materials of the model do slightly affect how paint goes down on them, and I don't know why, and I haven't worked it out, but I really like painting metal models and I really hate painting vinyl models. Aren't some of the Fallout ones? Oh no, they're resin, aren't they?
No, the ones that come with the box are vinyl. You're quite right. You are quite right. Yeah, I can't remember ever having an issue.
Have you got any of those that are unpainted, or have you done them all?
I've painted them all, yeah.
Okay. Well, at some point, maybe we'll have to get you some of the WizKids ones or something else, just so that you can try to paint. Get one of those models and try to paint it to a display standard, or like the best you can paint it, and just see as you're painting it, can you detect any difference? Because I don't know, it might just be in my head. I might just be imagining things, but yeah, like I say, I haven't worked out why or how it's happening, but I do sense a difference in how the paint goes down. Yeah, but on the subject of difficulty painting, there are certainly parts of models that I've done bad paint jobs on, and there's a subject that I'm planning on doing something about soon, and that's faces.
Yeah,
So I've noticed in some of my paint jobs from about 6 months ago that I'm ruining faces, and it's got all this blotchy texture over it. And it took a while to work out what I was doing wrong. And what I was doing is, I've got my brown and my flesh tone mixed together on my wet palette, and I do a layer of the darker, and then I do another, like a mostly layer of like the first highlight, and then I go to the second highlight and I put that on, and I'm just working pretty quickly on a very, very small space. How big's a face in 28 hero scale? It's tiny.
4 mil.
And so I'm tearing paint as I'm going. And so what I've started to do more recently is I'll paint a layer and then I'll stop and wait. And whether that means I clean the brush and just stare at it for 2 minutes, or whether that means that I'm painting other parts of the model, depends on the workflow of that particular model. But I'll paint one layer on the face and then I'll leave it for a few minutes, let it dry, then I'll come back to do the next layer.
I end up with them all just blue tacks onto bottles like that. So I do a bit and then move on to the next head, and then
so you're painting in a little batch.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 5 heads in front of me. Yeah.
So by the time you get to the 5th one, the first one's
dried,
ready for the next layer. Yeah. Whereas I'm used to painting one model at a time. That's just how I prefer to paint. But it means that I was running into this problem. And so I've got a couple of models where the faces are awful, like pockmarked and as if they've been diseased, and they're all scarred up. And so what I'm planning to do with one of them, it's a resin model, and so I'm planning to paint strip just the face and then see if I can repaint it. And that's going to be a very delicate operation to paint strip just the face of the model
and prime just the face.
Priming's not too much of a problem because we've got some airbrush primer which you can apply with just a normal brush.
I've got some of that.
With a rattle can primer, that then does become much more difficult. You'd have to mask off everything except for the face, which is going to be a difficult proposition. Could be done. It's just something you have to put a lot of work in. This kind of restoration work, I think is probably what you would call it, is a lot of effort, and I'm doing it because it's a technical exercise. Like if I wasn't interested in the process, I wouldn't be doing this. If it was just a case of I want to fix the model's face, I wouldn't bother. It's fine. On the tabletop from gaming distance, you're not going to notice it, particularly when it's amongst 80 other models. But because I want to try out this technique of stripping just a small area, priming it and repainting it, that's interesting to me, because I mean, weird technical things interest me.
Well, it's enjoying, isn't it? It's the cat just coming in.
Cat.
So swinging round then to brittle plastics. Hello, Henry.
Brittle plastics and bendy metals and snappable things, and particularly small things that then get lost. Have you had any cases recently where you have broken small parts off of a model?
So this is one of the Blackstone Fortress models, and though we disagree on this, I think the Blackstone Fortress models are made of a much more brittle plastic. The flame on the back here has snapped off, and I've had to glue that back on because of certain intervention on the models.
Cats. There was also another one of the Blackstone models that you had. I can't remember the name, but the Rogue Trader with the cigar.
Yeah, that
and
one.
The wisp of smoke that snapped off.
So me and Ed got Blackstone Fortress between us. We bought it off Facebook Marketplace from a gentleman local to us. Yeah. And one of the models that he had painted was the Eldari. And she's got like a sniper rifle. And the top half of that had snapped off. So I was looking at replacing that because it was missing from the box. And I found a design for just the replacement bit of the barrel online, because it's that common that it breaks. Someone's designed just the replacement barrel with the correct curvature and everything. which is
to 3D print and replace the part.
Yeah. So I honestly think, well, I'm certain the Blackstone Fortress models are made in China as opposed to made in the UK like all the other Games Workshop models. And I just think they're a way weaker plastic. I've only got. There's one more in the cabinet above me, but there's no breakages on that one.
I don't think I've actually painted any of. I've had them since before the first episode of the podcast, and I don't think I've actually painted any of them yet. I've got the flamethrower one ready to go because I want to put that with my Necromunda gang.
Yes, yeah, she's a good match for her. Either obviously want to use her as a sister, so I've kind of.
Yeah. So I had a few months ago, nearly a year ago actually, when I painted the original metal Gaunt's Ghost set. On my painting handle, I twisted Gaunt around, and to get a different angle to paint a different part, and it caught, and it kind of got stuck, and I was like, whatever, I'll just push it more until it comes free. And it did come free by bending the sword around in more than a 90-degree curve.
Ooh.
It was, given that that's a metal pewter part from 20 years ago that you can't get replacements of, I was kind of worried about that. Now, thankfully, because I've dealt with some pewter models before and I know kind of how to gently bend them back into shape, I was able to fix it.
If it was me, I would have given it a blast with the heat gun just to warm it up a bit and then very slowly bent it back.
Yeah, you can do. The problem there is that as soon as you get it to the melting point, like if you were to use a blowtorch or something to actually heat it up, as soon as you get it to the melting point, you ruin any of the surface detail.
No, I wouldn't be making it that hard, but I'd be
warming it with just a heat gun doesn't bring it to really the temperature where it's actually going to be any more ductile. Yes, technically it will help. Practically, it's not actually that big of a deal.
I mean, my heat gun's a 500-degree C1, so I mean,
what does the pewter melt at? I can't remember. I'll look it up.
Incredibly low temperatures, I believe.
Yeah. But I have had the case where, again, due to my painting handle, I've snapped a flag off of a particular model, and that was that snapped on the very, very thin, flag pole, which are almost always just a tiny rod of plastic.
Plastic, this is what we're talking about. Okay.
And yeah, this is a plastic model. This other one, and that's just a case of essentially you kind of have to pin it at that point.
Yes,
because it's too small to just glue it back on. No matter what glue you use, it's never going to be as strong as the original part. So pinning it then gives it some structure. And drilling into a tiny bit of plastic with your tiniest drill bit and trying not to poke out the side.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun.
Yeah, I usually make it work. I've been doing pinning and Dremel work a lot, so I can make that work.
Talking of breakages and little aerials, this one, cat hairs.
The crane
is that was snapped off when I got back home. So again, I think that's probably
the cats have been at it.
Yeah, I mean, so to my side here, which I'm sure most people have worked at, there's a table that's covered in models that I'm working on, and they just tend to get knocked off from that.
Cats. Difficult to work with. For the most part, I would say that every time that any model I've ever had has broken, I've been able to repair it pretty simply by either just gluing it back together or by pinning it in the worst cases.
So I think
I've never had the case where I've had to do anything more drastic.
I dropped one of my resin ones and the scope of the rifle snapped off and I have no idea where it went. And I replaced that with a piece of 3D printer filament. It was just the back part of the scope. I think that's probably the worst.
Yeah, that's another thing. If you actually lose the part, that's more difficult because then you have to either find a replacement or make a replacement for whatever part has gone missing. And I have had to do that occasionally. Usually it's just a case of rooting around on the carpet to try and find where that bit went. Such as my Svargan sniper that shattered into 1,000 pieces when my backdrop fell on it.
Bad. Sad day.
Or earlier today, someone who shall not be named knocked one of my Bretonian models and stepped on it, and it broke at the ankle, broke at the wrist. All the pieces were there, glued it back together, no problem. Particularly plastic model kits, just it's fine, glue them back together. They're not really any weaker unless it's a very, very spindly part. But the one thing I was looking at is actually replacing parts that went missing, because I was looking at a lot on eBay for some Cadian and Catachan models that were going pretty cheaply, but they had a lot of broken and what looked like missing parts. Particularly the quite a few of the Lasguns had had the barrel sections broken off.
Yeah.
Which you do occasionally see that is a somewhat fragile part, mainly because it's the bit that's sticking out of the model.
Yeah.
And so if they get dropped, if they get bashed around in a bag or something, that is a part that can break. But this particular lot had quite a few of them like that, and it didn't look like any of the barrels were included. So I was looking at ways of making a barrel section to replace the broken ones with. But I ended up not winning that lot, so I will eventually probably get some, and whenever that happens, that happens.
It's always the case with like those lots like that. There's always someone willing to spend silly money on broken bits.
There's always someone willing to spend a little bit more than I am because I'm poor.
Yeah, but well, it's more the value. You look at some things and you think they're bidding almost what it costs new.
I have had that sometimes. That is weird, particularly if it's something that's still available.
I think people just get carried away with the auction. It's cheaper than getting it from Games Workshop, and then they just get carried away and end up bidding to the point where they could have got it that cheap, brand new from a retailer.
Yeah, I usually don't see things go for more than the original retail price. Sometimes I have, but it's not that common. But certainly they come so close that you could have bought it new from an independent retailer.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't do Warhammer in particular, Games Workshop will sell their products to independent retailers at a discount, say 20%. And then a lot of those shops will then sell the items at, say, 15% discount. So that you've got an incentive to buy it from the independent retailer, and they make 5% profit rather than 20 or whatever.
Yeah, if you live in the UK, most of Europe, most of the United States, it is almost always cheaper to buy from whatever your local hobby shop is than it is from the Games Workshop that might even be next door.
It's a strange tactic, but as long as it keeps the local shops in profit, that's them.
The next topic?
The next topic, which you're going to have to introduce because I don't know what you're talking about.
Paul doesn't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the expression game changer or world changing or the best thing ever. And it's almost always used in relation to a product. So this was applied to contrast paints when they came out. This was applied to airbrushes when they were made popular recently, and also inks. And while I've been using inks, I've certainly missed the trend for them. So for you, Paul, if you got some new product, be it a different type of paint or a tool or something else for model making or mini painting, what would it need to be on a conceptual level for you to call it world changing or game changing or the best thing ever? What would it need to do for that?
Like to me, in terms of modelling, I think a game changer was resin printers. That's a big, being able to purchase STLs and print the model that you've bought yourself in your own home, or produce. Like for example, I resin print shoulder pads for my Space Marines so that they are Hawklords. that to me, that's a big change to the community.
So running a printer as a tool, as a machine, gives you something that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Definitely. I mean, making a bespoke chapter armor at Pauldron, I would have had to have freehand painted that before, which
on every single one.
On every single one, just wouldn't happen. Being able to print replacement parts is grand. Obviously, there's a whole copyright thing that obviously we're tiptoeing around. I mean, obviously.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about stealing intellectual property. I'm talking about like this, making a bespoke chapter. It just wouldn't exist. That to me is
either modifying
or
amazing. Repairing.
Yeah, that is, and like I say, mentioned earlier with the Blackstone Fortress, the fact that someone had designed that barrel because they break off so often. That's
an
cool.
upgrade. It's
That's
kind
cool.
of a repair, but also an upgrade to the original in that it's a lot more durable. Yeah, that's a good example.
I think that's the biggest change to the hobby in the last sort of 10, 15 years. It's got to be in it.
I would absolutely agree that resin printing, particularly for mini painting, 3D printing in general, is kind of game changing in that way. So my notes here, I've actually got 2 different groups of people within the hobby that use the term game changer or world changing or the best thing ever or some other variant.
To me, it just strikes me as the kind of thing that an influencer would say. Okay, when they're trying to flog something,
You have inadvertently hit every point that I wanted to make, sort of. So let me explain what my notes are down here, kind of what I was trying to eke out. There are 2 groups of people in the community that would use these type of terms, and I've marked them up as noob and pro, which is not particularly fair, but I'm going to use those terms because I don't really know, unless I just used the inexperienced and the experienced is the alternate way of saying that maybe. But if you put, for example, contrast paints in front of an inexperienced painter, they'll think it's game changing because it gives them a glaze effect and a shadow effect instantly with almost no work.
In terms of contrast paints, as we've mentioned before, and we've had viewers send us in really good results. It's not the be and all end all that Games Workshop want to portray it as, but they do make some really good results on small, highly detailed things. As we've seen when I tested it on terrain, just didn't work. On flat surfaces, it just doesn't work. I can't see one to show. So yeah, to a certain extent, is pretty revolutionary if you're the kind of person that wants to play the game but doesn't care about the painting.
Yeah, it makes a model look better than it would look for someone painting it with a low skill level. But it doesn't necessarily look anywhere near as good as a more experienced painter can do without it.
Yeah, and I think that's the point.
The second group of people that I've kind of picked out as being the more experienced people who would use the term game changer are the people who would look at contrast paint and ignore the advertising for being like, hey, wash over white and it's really easy and it makes it look great, but actually then test it out, put in a lot of effort, a lot of time to work out how you can use it. And there's a few painters. Are we going to mention Dana Howell again? Such as Dana Howell and her videos on contrast paints, and some of the other mini painters as well, doing videos and articles and stuff, who use contrast paints in very particular ways that aren't what's advertised, but they've put in the effort and the time to learn how the stuff actually works and behaves, and how they can use that to create different effects.
Like I like the leather one, the snakebite leather one. I think it works really well over a brown base. So yeah,
that looks great for a wood effect.
I mean, if we look at this mini, so this is the Forge World model that I bought brand new, really cool. I bought that contrast paint for that. So that is the contrast brown directly on white. And I did not like the result at all. I did 2 or 3 layers of brown wash over this.
Yeah, just to tint it back down.
Because I just didn't like it on its own there. But when you paint it over brown, you get a really nice sort of, so like that wood. So
I recognise that base.
Yeah. So that, introduced like a wood grain, and I really like that. And that's what I use that for. I would never put it over white again.
I'm not saying that I would never put it over white, but I'm certainly not going to just put it over white with no other work done.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the thing that I wanted to suggest and maybe discuss whether it's correct or not, is that an inexperienced painter will look for something that's going to give them a massive boost with no effort, whereas an experienced painter is going to look for something that they're going to have to put effort and work into to make it to understand how the thing actually functions. But once they get it, they're then able to do effects that they weren't able to do otherwise. I think that's sort of what I was getting at. And that may be true of other hobbies as well.
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say that using contrast paints is the lazy way out or something like that. I just...
Yeah, I think the way that I'm saying it is a bit harsh.
Yeah, no.
Because I can't really work out how to say it better.
Yeah.
Just my grammar, I guess.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of doing it, and I've seen some very nice results. As I say, we previously posted some of Nick's pictures. Those come out great. Those lizard men models. And
yeah,
I think that for certain models, it works really well, like those, because there's loads of detail in terms of scales that, on the lizards, that it highlights beautifully. And hair, I use the white one for my Sisters of Battle hair, just because.
Yeah, over sculpted hair and sculpted fur, I think particularly over fur would be something that would look good.
Yes.
Do I have any models with fur in? Some like wolf pelt, bear skin.
So I've got these ones have got wolf pelt on them, but I didn't do it with the contrast paint because I didn't want it that dark. So back to your topic of sort of game changes.
I certainly like the way that you described 3D printing, because 3D printing takes a lot of effort. People think that it's the easiest thing. You have a machine in the corner, you push a button and it gives you what you want.
Moo.
And it just ain't so.
No, it's a hobby to support a hobby.
They are, the amount of time it takes to actually print stuff, it is a hobby in itself, and it takes a lot of time and effort. Would that it were the case that you could just push a button and it spits out the part you want. That would be great.
Yeah, we're getting a bit Star Trek-y there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'd love a replicator.
I mean, the thing with resin printing is disgusting. It is messy. It stinks. The cleanup's horrible. It's a means to an end. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
These bases I've done, yeah, they're really cool. But it's a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, like, I'm sure you'll agree that you have also seen 3D printed Titans where people have deliberately knocked off IP, and you look at it and you just think that's amazing, but that must have taken you 6 months. Like, I'd rather pay...
I have seen someone run the calculations of the print time for the whole thing, and it was in the thousands of hours.
Yeah,
given that every 100 hour, like 24 hours a day, 4 days is 100 hours.
Yeah, I'd rather just pay Forge World at that point than go to that astronomical length of time. It's crazy.
Yeah. Also bear in mind that as you use, particularly a resin printer, as you use it, you're using up some of the parts. The FEP sheets, they're pretty cheap. The screens are not cheap, and they have a finite lifespan.
Yes, yeah.
And printing, if you were to print something the size of a Titan, don't print a Games Workshop model that size, or well, any size. But if you were to print a model of that size, that amount of volume, you would be using a significant chunk of the lifespan of the screen.
I bet you it'd be a fair old whack of resin in terms of cost as well. I bet you.
And every litre of resin is 40 quid at the moment. That's the rough kind of price that they're coming out at. 3 or 4 litres of resin, probably.
I bet it'd be more
50
than that.
quid.
I bet it'd be more than that.
Plus the cost of a third of the life of the screen. Even resin printing that's a massive chunk of money.
Yeah, it's definitely a tool in addition to the hobby. It's not going to replace the hobby. I like if I go back to the Fallout models, I like how a lot of their stuff they sell physical and like licensed STLs to print the models up. That's pretty cool. But obviously, if I was building an army, obviously the Fallout games are skirmish games, so you less models. But if it was like something like Warhammer, where you've got 100 models on the table, you ain't gonna want to print that. It'd take forever. I
mean, on my printer, which is not necessarily the best quality for models, for gaming models they're fine, but not for display. I can print out anywhere between maybe 10, maybe 15 models, depending on what shape and size they are, and that print will take 14 hours, 16 hours, maybe 20 hours. So I can run a print every day and get 10 models a day. In 2 weeks, I've got 100 models. But that's not just a case of I press a button and leave it for the 16 hours. That's a case of I have to sit there for 30 minutes and go through the process of taking one print off, cleaning the parts, cleaning the printer, making sure everything's set up. To go to that much effort for an army game, here's the thing. I think we're hitting on an old expression, and I'm gonna have to remember how it goes. An amateur will expend time to save resources, and a professional will expend resources to save time. This has come into very great effect with commission work recently in the last 5, 10, 15 years. If you commission someone to make you a cosplay piece or make you sculpt you a model or paint a model or some other thing, you're not really paying for the cost of the material. You're paying for the time it cost that person to make it.
Yeah. So roundabout, what the point you were getting at is that you would just buy an original model. If you were doing commission work, you'd just buy the original model because it's going to save you time. And if you're working piecework, essentially, time is money. I suppose there's the transition of from metal to plastic. So I suppose a significant change in the miniature market, I think, would possibly be the transition from metal to plastic, which I think would have been, early 2000s?
I'm not sure if it's quite that simple, because
obviously there's different companies doing...
Yeah, there are plastic model kits from the 80s, and there are metal models in the 2010s.
Yeah, I mean, there's still metal models now.
But there is a general trend from mostly metal casting to mostly plastic injection molding. And I think, on the whole, the larger reason for that, there's a few, it's not just a case of this one factor, but I would say probably the biggest factor is person time. To pay someone to run metal casting, setting up a mold, heating the metal, pouring it in, getting the next mold, even if you've got hundreds of molds that you're doing it to all at the same time, that's a process that is very time intensive for the person. Whereas injection molding is mostly automated.
Okay. Yeah.
Once you've got the mold made, you attach it to the machine, and the machine churns out a cast every 10-15 seconds and runs all the way through the day and night.
Yeah. I mean,
you pay a technician to look after it.
What I was kind of getting at was, with a metal model, it is really difficult to do any kind of individuality. I can chop our arms off to a certain extent and change the angle and all that, but when you switch to plastic, all of a sudden you've got way more options in terms of customization. like if I compare, like for example, my Sisters of Battle, I've got the metal ones from the early 2000s, and I've got the plastic ones from last year. There's a lot more options. Like in the metal ones, I've got the Canon S. I've got 3 different arms, so power sword, chain sword, and I think one's a book. But there's not as much going on. You look at the plastic one, and there's just thousands of bits.
In terms of the parts that come with the kit, it's you get more parts because it's cheaper to make.
Yes,
yeah. The molds, it's cheaper to make a plastic version than a metal version.
Yeah.
Having come from the days where metal models were much more common, particularly for character models, not for line infantry, we absolutely did take hacksaws and Dremels and cut heads and arms and legs off.
Just sounds terrifying.
And then attach them back on, or swap things over and attach different bits, and then green stuff or milliput or some other modeling clay to cover over where we've cut. We did that. It was hard work, but we did that. I don't think everybody did that. Whereas in the early 2000s, when plastic kits were much more common, everyone did that, because you could just, with a hobby knife, cut it, glue it back on with the polystyrene cement. You might have to do a bit of milliput work, but not nearly as much. And I think I think you're right to bring that up, because that was a big, important step in the right direction for the hobby, to make conversion work easier.
Yeah, it's sort of like individuality as well. Like I've got 10 of these. They all look exactly the same because they're all 3rd edition monopose guys.
2nd edition.
Second edition. It's just having the ability to change something other than if it was just solid metal. But at least if it's plastic, I can put a different head on it. It's.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting step forward.
I actually knew someone back at my local games workshop many years ago who had a whole bunch of the 2nd edition Beakies, and would Dremel out the helmet and would glue in like one of the heads without helmet from the 3rd edition kit, just to make them different and more interesting.
Yeah.
I know that I didn't actually see the model completed, but he was working on a Tech Marine as well, which was a metal kit.
Nice.
And he put the backpack, because the backpack's easy to swap over, but some of the other parts, particularly the shoulder pad, I don't know how he was planning to do that, but he was planning to cut the shoulder pad out, and so he would have a 2nd edition starter set Beaky in the mono pose, but it would be a Tech Marine.
Cool.
That's an ambitious project. I would love, if anyone knows who the heck that is, I would love to see the final version of that after 20 years. But I doubt I'm ever going to see that model, as cool as the idea was.
Yeah, I have a fine cast Tech Marine, and I have a metal Tech Marine. So the fine cast one came with the Thunder Cannon? Something. He was actually alright, to be fair, in terms of the fine cast. It was just the cannon that was a bit warpy.
So, let's look at the Order Redactus,
yes.
which is the section where people at home can type in the comments section down below all of the corrections and more information about the things we've talked about and other such stuff. And we have, once again, a message from Foxymet's chief researcher from the Order Redactus, who says, and I quote, "The official Order Redactus report regarding the study of material entitled Back to the Brush, Episode 10. The Order Redactus found further wordplay on Volpone to Volpone and Volpone to be still amusing," which is good. That was months ago now, but still funny. The Order Redactus would like to inform Edskar that the almighty Henry is in fact one of the Emperor's avatars. Press X to doubt. And thus his worship is not heretical, nor is he a false idol. The lack of him in this episode is noted, but the many photos and appearances, including Elgar and Dusty, have appeased us.
Yeah,
that would be, of course, when Paul was taking his photographs for last episode, The cats were
Yeah, they were
helping out.
They were helping.
Miss Meaning Life is very, very sweet, and Chief Researcher Foxymet sympathises with the desire to start a million projects at once, and this is the burden of any creator, and that is true on both accounts.
Yeah,
Miss Meaning Life was lovely to work with, and yeah, starting thousands of projects is the thing.
Finish 1 minute before you start the next. No.
Yeah, no, that's not happening.
No, I've got like a desk full of them.
Paul's action figure / doll is a 1/10 scale, which gives approximately 7 inches that you guesstimated her at. So this is the Battle Sister from McFarlane?
Yes, McFarlane.
So if she's 18 centimetres at 1/10 scale, that would put her at 1.80 m, which is a pretty average height for a fully grown human. So that actually makes a lot of sense. So 1/10 scale is almost certainly correct, or at least close enough to be considered correct. The Auto Redactors researcher Engel has given modelling with green stuff a go before. He in fact made the wedding cake toppers for when that they were married, and a photo of those will be attached. And that ends the transmission for the Auto Redactors this month. So if you have anything that you would like to talk about from what we've discussed today, either further information or a correction where we've made a mistake, please leave that in the comments section below.
As always, we're going to pick out the 10 models that probably had the most coverage today, and we'll post those over on Instagram so you can take a look, along with my terrible Chaos Spawn paint job.
Cool. So for this month, I'm Edgar.
I'm Paul,
and thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next month when we get back to the brush.